My name is Elena, and there are memories in this world that do not fade even when the years try to wash them away. Some memories grow quieter with time, some lose their sharp edges, some turn soft like old photographs, but there are a few that cling to the soul like shadows that refuse to loosen their grip. Mine is one such memory, a memory that has followed me across decades, across seasons, across every breath I have taken since the day it was born. One cold evening when I was 45 and certain that my life had settled into silence. I had convinced myself that quiet was enough, that routine was enough, that I no longer needed the warmth of someone waiting for me at the door. I lived alone in a stone house on the edge of a small coastal town, a place where the air smelled of salt and forgotten stories. My days were simple. I taught literature at the local community college. I read books that felt like companions. I cooked dinners for one. I watered the same plants every morning, watching them grow, listening to them breathe, and I told myself again and again that this was a complete life, that absence did not ache, that loneliness did not swallow. But there was a restlessness under the surface, a small tremor in the soul, the kind you pretend not to notice because the truth it carries might be louder than you are willing to hear. I thought I had buried the last chapter of my heart long ago. I thought I had sealed it closed so tightly that not even a breeze could open it again. But fate has a way of knocking on doors you forget you left unlocked. Fate has a way of waking memories that you thought had turned to dust. It happened on an ordinary morning, late September. The sky pale blue, the clouds moving like tired travelers, and I was walking down the narrow path that led from my house to the shore. I carried a notebook with me, as always, to write down thoughts that flickered too quickly to hold. And as I reached the old wooden bench by the water, I saw someone sitting there, a man, his back turned. A notebook with me, as always, to write down thoughts that flickered too quickly to hold. And as I reached the old wooden bench by the water, I saw someone sitting there, a man, his back turned, his shoulders slightly hunched, the wind touching his hair gently like it remembered him. I do not know why I stopped. Maybe it was the way he was sitting so still, maybe it was the quiet around him, or maybe something in me recognized a story before a face, but I felt a strange pull, as if my heart had paused and then taken a step forward without my permission. I sat at the far end of the bench, leaving space between us. I did not intend to speak, yet he turned to me with a faint smile, the kind that carries both warmth and sorrow, and in that moment something inside me stirred like an old wound, remembering its name. He said, "The sea is quieter than I expected," and I replied, "It is loud when you want it to be quiet, and quiet when you want it to speak." He laughed softly, a sound that felt familiar in a way that made my breath tighten. And he told me his name, Adrian, a traveler, he said, searching for a place that remembered him. I asked what that meant, and he said, "Sometimes you return to places hoping they kept a piece of you safe." There was something different about him, something that felt half broken and half reborn, like someone who had lived too many lives inside one body. He looked at the sea as if it carried answers, and at the sky as if it carried questions, and both made him ache in ways he did not try to hide. His hands were lined with stories, his eyes carried storms and gentleness all at once, and I felt a strange quietness settle inside me, the kind that only arrives when a truth is approaching. We spoke for hours, time slipping past like water through open fingers. He told me he had once been an artist before life demanded he become something else. He told me he had loved once deeply, wildly, destructively, and that love had left him hollow for years. I told him about my lonely house and my empty evenings and the silence that lived with me like an uninvited companion. He listened with a softness that felt dangerous because it made me want to say more, to open the door wider, to let him see the rooms I had kept locked for so long. Days passed. He kept returning to the bench, and without planning to, I kept finding myself there too. Some mornings he arrived before me, some evenings we sat until the sky swallowed its light. He sketched the shore while I wrote in my notebook, and sometimes we did not speak at all, and yet everything felt said, everything felt understood. He never asked why I lived alone, and I never asked what he was running from, but between us there was an unspoken truth, a fragile thread weaving our breaths together, our silences together, our fears together. One afternoon he asked if I believed memories could die, and I said, "Memories do not die, people do." He stared at me with eyes that held decades of ache and whispered, "Then why do some memories feel more alive than we are?" And before I could answer, he stood and walked toward the rocks near the shore, his figure outlined by the falling sunlight, and I felt something shift, something in the air, something in me. The next day he brought me a small sketch of the bench where we sat together, my figure drawn faintly, his drawn in heavier strokes, as if he feared he might disappear before the drawing was complete. I asked why he gave it to me, and he said, "Because some people deserve to be kept safe on paper when the world feels too fragile." I felt warmth bloom in places inside me I had forgotten existed. I felt fear bloom too because I knew this kind of closeness, this kind of tenderness carried the scent of endings and beginnings both, and I did not know which one would come for us first. One evening as we walked along the narrow path, the wind colder than usual, he stopped and said the kind of words that do not belong to chance. He said, "Elena, I feel like I have known you in another life or in a dream or in a memory that refuses to die," and something in me trembled because I had been feeling the same without daring to speak it. But beneath his words there was something unsaid, something heavy, something waiting like a shadow behind his eyes, and I knew he was carrying a truth. He had not yet shared a truth that might break whatever fragile beginning we had found. The next morning he did not come. I waited on the bench, the sea restless, the air thick with unanswered questions. And when he finally arrived hours later, he looked different, quieter, dimmer, like someone who had spent the night wrestling with ghosts. He said, "We need to talk," and those words made the world fall silent around us. He sat beside me, the distance between us heavier than the days we had shared, and he told me things that felt like knives made of truth. He told me he had been sick for years, that something inside him was failing slowly, relentlessly, that he had traveled not to find a new life but to say goodbye to the places that once held him together. He told me he had come to this town last when he was young, when life still felt possible, when he had been a different man entirely, and that returning here now felt like closing a circle he was never ready to end. My breath broke inside me, the sky turning blurry, the sea turning distant, and he held my hand gently as if he feared his touch might crumble me. He said, "I did not mean to meet you, I did not mean to feel something again, but some memories do not ask permission to be born, they just appear, and they refuse to die, and you, Elena, you feel like a memory my heart had been waiting to remember." I could not speak, the words froze in my throat, my heart pounding like a bird trapped inside a cage looking for an escape. And yet I did not want to escape. I wanted to hold him, I wanted to keep him. I wanted to make life, give him more time, more breath, more shore, more tomorrows. But life is not a listener, it does not bend for our wishes. The sun lowered itself quietly, and he whispered, "I am leaving soon, and I do not know if I will ever return," and those words landed inside me like a beginning of grief, a grief that felt older than the moment, older than us, older than the world itself. That night I could not sleep. I walked around my lonely house, touching walls that felt colder, touching windows that looked emptier, touching my own heartbeat. As if trying to calm a storm, I did not know how to stop the world outside silent, the world inside breaking. The next morning I returned to the bench, hoping he would be there, hoping he would take back his words, hoping the sea would return him to me whole. But he was not there, only the waves, only the wind, only the memory of his voice saying my name the way no one had said it in years. I knew this was only the beginning of the ache, and not the end. I knew part one of this story was not a beginning at all, but a door opening to a road. I feared to walk a road that would change everything inside me. And yet I walked it because some memories refused to die, and some loves, even the briefest ones, reshaped the entire lifetime around them. I am standing again at the edge of my own voice, trying to gather the courage to tell you the part of the story that I have been running from for years. And yet this part follows me like a shadow that have been running from for years, and yet this part follows me like a shadow that knows every trembling breath inside me. The memory I speak of never learned how to fade, and I never learned how to let it go, and now at this age, when my hands shake more than my heart, I still feel him as if he is made of the same air that surrounds me. When I woke up that morning, I did not know that the world had already decided to steal something from me. I stepped out into the cold air, wondering if today would be any different from the days before, or if the same silence would follow me again into the kitchen, into the hallway, into every room that somehow echoed with his absence. I made tea for myself and for him out of habit, and it was only when I placed a second cup on the table that I realized how cruel ritual can be when it pretends to offer comfort. I sat there staring at the steam rising from the untouched tea, and it felt like watching a soul leave a body ever so slowly. And in that moment I felt one truth rising inside me. He had never truly left. Not in the way people leave. Not in the way time erases. He had remained lodged between the smallest quiet moments of my life. Like breath. Like pain. There are memories that obey you and step aside when you ask them to, but the memory of him never listened. It kept returning with the stubbornness of a wound that refuses to heal. And every time it came back, it brought with it pieces of his voice, pieces of his smile, and pieces of the goodbye he never got to finish. I remember the day I walked to that old road again, the one he once promised to return to. My feet were heavier than my heart, And that is saying something because my heart has carried whole storms without falling apart. The sky was gray in a way that reminded me of winter afternoons when he would wrap his scarf around my shoulders and pretend that warmth could protect us from everything. Today there was no scarf, no warmth, only air, and the sound of unseen things breaking inside me. I reached the bend of the road and stood still. Nothing had changed. The trees were old but not dying. The stones were still scattered the way he used to kick them when he was lost in thought. The wind carried the same tired sighs of the earth. And I stood there with the same hope I had once buried so deep that even I thought it was gone. I closed my eyes and whispered his name. I do not know why I did it. Maybe I wanted to see if the air still remembered him. Maybe I wanted to hear his name outside my own chest for once. Or maybe I was simply tired of pretending that I had moved on. And then the strangest thing happened. The wind shifted. Not softly but almost urgently, as if it recognized something, as if it wanted to answer me. I felt a passing warmth brush against my cheek. A warmth that made my knees weak because it felt exactly like the touch he used to leave behind when he tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. I wanted to believe it was him. I wanted to believe the wind had carried a piece of him back to me. But life is not that kind. Life offers illusions so tender that they hurt more than reality. Life gives pieces, never wholes. I opened my eyes and of course there was no one. Only the empty road, the quiet air, and the faint echo of something that once felt like a promise. I sat down on the ground. The earth was cold. The kind of cold that travels into bones and stays there. And I whispered the truth that I had kept hidden for more years than I can count. I told the road that I never stopped waiting. Not even for a single day. Not even when I pretended to. Not even when others told me to let go. And not even when I convinced myself I had forgotten. But the greatest truth of all, the one that shaped my whole life, was simpler. I still loved him. In every moment. In every season. In every breath. I still loved him. And love, when left unfinished, becomes heavier with age. It becomes a burden that sits quietly behind the ribs, refusing to leave. It becomes memory. A memory that refused to die. I looked at the sky and imagined him standing there the way he once did. Hands in pockets. Eyes soft. A small smile forming slowly like dawn. And I broke. I broke in the quietest way a person can break. Without sound. Without tears. Without falling apart. Just a slow collapse inside the heart where no one can see. When I finally stood up, the world looked different. Not because anything had changed, but because I had finally understood something I had ignored for years. He was never coming back. Not to this road. Not to my life. Not to the woman I had become while waiting. And yet, the memory of him was still alive. Stronger than presence. Stronger than loss. Stronger than the time that tried so hard to erase him. I walked home slowly. With each step I felt something tighten inside me and something else loosen. I realized that I had given him a lifetime of my heart without asking for anything in return. And even now, even after so many years, I would not take any of it back. Some loves are not meant to be lived. They are meant to be remembered. Some stories are not meant to be completed. They are meant to echo. And some promises are not meant to be fulfilled. They are meant to haunt the places where they were spoken. I reached my door and turned back for one last look at the road. The wind blew softly across my face, almost like a farewell. Almost like an apology. Almost like love. And I knew he was gone. But the memory of him, the memory that refused to die, would walk with me for the rest of my life. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Or the closest thing to enough that life.